I'm JinJa Birkenbeuel.
And I'm Esther, Ikoro, and we're the hosts of the Honest Field Guide podcast.
Entrepreneurship is no joke. The journey is full of anticipation, failure, hope, and disappointment. You'll make money and be totally broke at the same time.
The Honest Field Guide podcast tells you the truth.
We know being an entrepreneur is crazy hard and you will sometimes cry at dinner. Listen in to be inspired, laugh, and learn how to really thrive on your business journey.
Today on the Honest Field Guide podcast, Tales from the Front Lines, Cautionary Tales.
Oh, this is going to be a good juicy one.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, there's a lot of cautionary tales on starting a business and being an entrepreneur. I mean, there's stuff that you have no idea what's going to hit you. You just do not know.
Yeah, it's one of those things you only know until you start kind of plugging away, and then it feels like things just get thrown at you.
Yeah.
Like what happens when you start a business and your business partner decides that they don't want to do it anymore.
That's really bad. Or like things don't even get thrown at you. You'll find yourself in something, like you're in it and you're like, oh my God,
you just have to deal with it.
Have I done? What am I doing? Why am I here? It's really, you can get really kind of shaken to your core.
JinJa, tell us what we're going to be talking about today.
This is an exciting podcast because it's all the scary things that have to do with entrepreneurship and startup and running a business. So we're going to talk about insurance, legal issues, accounting problems, intellectual property, speaking and writing skills, and we'll talk a little bit about sleep, food, family, sex, and exercise.
Okay.
and whether or not you can have friends.
Well, I've never been able to have friends, so
that is absolutely false.
Born entrepreneur.
Not true.
So there's a long list of things that can happen that can become the source of these cautionary tales, but let's start in a good old-fashioned place, which is
positive
insurance.
Oh, that's so dry, but it's real.
Yeah, and that's not positive at all. I mean,
it's not. It can be very negative.
Insurance is negative. It's sold from the negative perspective because it's
fear-based.
It's fear-based.
Yes.
And some people think that fear is overhyped until something happens.
Absolutely. And, we live in a litigious society in the United States. Everybody sues everybody all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you slip outside on someone's front door, you're looking around trying to figure out, I fell, I hurt my leg, who can I sue for this?
And then it's your front door, so you got to sue yourself.
Exactly. You're like, what's up?
You're suing your husband, like, you did not shovel, sue him. I'm in the back handing him papers,
exactly.
like,
Find a way. Find a way. I mean, it's really serious. I mean, I like that we're first hitting on insurance because this is the one place that a lot of entrepreneurs, especially those that are, well, it's not even especially those. It's everybody that's an entrepreneur that's got a business, that's starting a business or that has an existing business. You have it because you're out there, you're making money, right? You're doing something to make money, which means you're selling a product, a service, your ideas, your strategy, whatever it is, you're giving it to a customer and that customer is expecting something in return. But in the process, things can go wrong. It depends on your business, so, like, if you're making a product, your product might fail and someone might get hurt.
Yeah. If you have a brick and mortar business that makes food or that does a service, anything can go wrong.
Yeah. Someone eats it and eats the food. And then what happens? They get sick.
Or they don't tell you they have a peanut allergy. Right?
Yeah.
You don't meet accessibility requirements for your state and a person in a wheelchair can't get through the doorway.
Right.
There's so many places that you have to protect yourself and things that can happen.
What kinds of insurance do you need to have as a small business or a startup? It depends on the type of business you have, right? So professional services, for example, and, we're not, Esther and I are not giving legal advice or we're not telling you how to, form your company. We're not giving you health advice. You do need to hire a professional for these types of services for your business. Highly recommend getting a professional. We're not licensed to do your taxes, but I've had Birk Creative for 21 years, and I'm so loaded up on insurance, and I have to be.
Like, what type of insurance do you need?
Definitely commercial liability insurance, for sure.
Okay.
And if you don't know all the intricacies around commercial liability, you must look it up on Google. Like, what is commercial liability, and what kind of commercial liability do I need? You need to have automobile insurance. For example, do you drive a car to your client? Do you drive a car for business? You must have insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs to be commercial liability insurance.
Yep.
You can have personal car insurance, but if you're on the job and you have an accident in your car and you have personal insurance, that may not be enough to cover you, especially if you're on a project for a client.
Gotcha.
You just don't know things like that. You might want to think about getting professional liability and errors and emissions coverage. What is that? That's insurance that if you're developing content for clients, or you're putting out advertising or making printed materials or digital materials, and you have a mistake or an error, and you have to basically redo that mistake, who's going to pay for that mistake?
You
will
or
pay
your
for that.
Insurance.
Right. And if your client decides to come after you to say, you lost us $1 million on this thing because you had a typo on an ad, or you provided information that we submitted for something and it was wrong, then, you're going to have to pay to redo that. So you got to somehow figure out who's going to cover that cost. And there's a lot of regulations around that from the insurance companies, because you need to have processes in place that verify to your insurance company that you took every step possible to do the right thing, and then a mistake happened. Because they're going to come back and say, well, what processes do you have in place that you could have gotten some kind of sign off, or, whatever it looks like. So errors and emissions coverage is critical. And sometimes you don't think about these things when you're launching a business.
Right.
I mean, there's freelance social media people out there doing business for other clients, and they're not taking their responsibility seriously enough in terms of the content that they're delivering and creating. I mean, they're just not, because they're not thinking about it. Other big one is workman's compensation insurance.
Yep.
Do you know what that is, Esther?
Yes, I do.
What do you think it is? What is it?
Workman's comp.
10 words or less. Just kidding.
If you get hurt on the job, your workplace has to make sure that because you got hurt in the context of doing that job, they take care of your medical expenses. If you have to go to the emergency room and there's a copay, that business's insurance needs to cover whatever damages or costs are incurred, even if that means loss of time, whatever damages are incurred by dealing with that injury.
And there's actually more to it than that. Mm-hmm. You really need to talk to your insurance agent, listeners, to get more details about workman's compensation insurance. But, for people that have a business that are hiring or engaging other people in any way to work for them, whether it's paid or not, if they're on the field or outside or even in your office, you need to have insurance to ensure that if something does happen, whatever that looks like, that you're protected. And if they decide to sue your company, you've got insurance to cover the costs to help that person become repaired. And so there's other things around workman's comp, for people that are for companies that are in professional services or entrepreneurs. When you work on large contracts for large companies, they have requirements around insurance before you can be hired to do the work. And so, you want to go after a big contract with McDonald's, you better have all the insurances in place. Otherwise, when they come back and check, you may not get the job because you don't have the right insurance. For people that are considering leaving their comfortable jobs where there's health insurance and things like that, depending on the state you live in, the health opportunities and health care systems available can be either very available or very limited. So Illinois has terrible safety nets for small business and startups and entrepreneurs. A state like New York has all kinds of opportunities for small business to benefit from insurance policies. Yeah, I mean, so you have to think about the availability of insurance, especially if we're talking about detriments to health that are related to stress, that are related to, starting or maintaining a business. Because if you don't have your health and something goes wrong, but you're in a place where you can't afford health care, then what is your business going to do, or how are you going to take care of your employees?
Yeah.
Because there's things like disability insurance. If something goes wrong with your body and you can't work, how are you going to pay? How are you going to make payroll? Or how are you going to make sure that you take care of your family? Having a lawyer, not your friend, not your cousin,
a real lawyer,
important. That can be objective and can protect you against unwanted surprises that you might read in a contract, and they understand the language of legalese. They get it, and they can say, well, this is a real kind of nuanced way to explain something. Let's help rewrite this. Or, having a lawyer review your contracts for your subcontractors that you might be bringing on for work, or if you need to have NDAs created for whatever reason, having a lawyer help you interpret complicated issues is critical. They will protect you against loss. You don't want to be in that situation and not have a lawyer. You want to have a lawyer ready for when you need them. It's like you cannot be reactionary when you start a business. I mean, some other thing to think about when you hire people to work for you, whatever they are, you might want to consider having a non-disclosure agreement in place because there's proprietary intellectual property happening. Conversations,
client
experiences,
lists.
Client lists, access to data,
formulas.
You have to think about these things. You when you're starting a business, you're sometimes operating at such light speed that you're not taking into consideration protecting your information. And you have to slow down and think to yourself, I really need to protect my stuff. And it's painful to look at someone and say, before we have this conversation, would you please sign this NDA? It's like when you fall in love with someone and you've been with them for a year and then you want to marry them and you're like, I need to give you a prenuptial agreement. You're like, but wait a minute, I thought we loved each other. Well, you know what? It depends. The other piece is for people that are, doing a lot of work in public with social media, they're taking pictures of things, consider the people in your images may not want to be in your pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, really, like there might be like, you better take that down. Like take that picture out or I'm in your YouTube video. You never told me.
I have a good example of that.
Cautionary tale for YouTube. There's a guy that called me, asked me, because of my Google Digital Coaches work, he wanted to know if I could help him take down a video on YouTube because one of the people in the video said that they were going to sue them because they didn't give permission to be in the video. And they actually, were having trouble getting the video taken down for some reason. But the point is that you got to think about things like that when you start a business. Like there's people that may smile at you, but unless you get official photo releases, or you have some kind of something that says, you walk in this door, I'm cool. Yeah. These are little details that catch you by surprise, especially when you start becoming successful.
Stylists with clothing, people who do fashion-related things, hair, makeup, nails, all of that stuff. People use other people as their models. So I have a great example in mind of a model that was asked to do a photo shoot at the very beginning of an establishment of a business. Like when it was small, this model got free hair and makeup, and she got professional photographs taken of her. Everyone was working together in agreement. This establishment went on to be featured in large magazines, not necessarily a photo of this individual, but this establishment became known.
Okay.
This model, out of nowhere, is like, hey, remember those pictures that you took of me, some of which are still on the old galleries of your website, my boyfriend thinks I should be paid for those. And it's like, you were paid by $200 worth of makeup, a free haircut and color, and professional photos, but there was nothing in writing.
I was just going to say, was it in writing? No.
There was nothing in writing.
Okay.
Now,
handshakes.
Those photos were immediately removed. Luckily, they were in a place where they could be removed, because had they been published somewhere, for instance, you can't unpublish a magazine.
You can't pull them back. So other things to think about are, your intellectual property and trust of any consultants you hire. And this goes beyond the NDA. This is really just working with people that believe in your mission, understand what you're trying to do, and are part of moving things forward for your company. And you have to give them the ability to move forward in their own things as well, but they have to kind of understand that you're building your company, or you're growing, or you're scaling your company, and they've got to kind of get that before you bring them on. And this is, it's challenging to have conversations around this.
Yeah,
because it requires you to be authentic and honest and to the point.
Right.
And, sometimes with people, when you're bringing people on, you don't really know them that well, and you kind of you don't want to be all business, especially when you're small. Like you want to be able to have, casual, friendly, trusted, honest, we can work together conversations. And it's hard to find people in the first place, but
it helps to have a standard operating procedure. A standard operating procedure when you're onboarding someone to a project or to your company. That way you can say, this isn't personal. And you don't have to say this is personal, because as a business owner, you should hold yourself to the standard that you're operating a legally established business. And if you care about your business, then you hold yourself to certain standards. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's something you should be proud of, no matter how small you are, of having all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. Those are the type of things that lead to company culture.
Set your business up for success. Set your business up for big opportunities that show up at your door. I mean, preparation is everything, because if opportunity's there and you're not ready, you're gonna lose it. Networking for your business. Like what is that about? Like what are some really good ways to network when you are an entrepreneur, a small business, and you're maybe one or two people, and you got to figure out,
Number one.
What to do?
Number
Esther?
one, join your local chamber of commerce.
Okay.
I would say, because one, it makes you feel legitimate to the other businesses around you. You're privy to what your local area is doing for businesses, and you get opportunities to, say, advertise and partner, and you understand what the established business powers that be are doing in the area to promote local businesses.
I love that. But I also think, before you can join a chamber of commerce, you have to ask yourself, am I a networker? Can I network? What is it like if I am alone and I walk into a room and I don't know anybody there? Can I navigate that environment and be successful at meeting other like-minded individuals or getting the things I need?
Do you think it's possible to do that to be an entrepreneur if you can't network to a certain extent? How do you get clients?
I know
How do you make connections and grow if you can't talk to people? Maybe it depends on the scale, because sometimes you walk into a huge room full of people, like, for instance, at a chamber of commerce event, and you don't. Some people are better one-on-one. Some people are better in large settings. So I understand that. But I feel like to be an entrepreneur, unless you have an e-commerce business where you just deal with your clients over email and deal with whatever the factory or place that produces your product is, you have to practice and hone your interpersonal skills, at least from a professional perspective, to a certain extent.
And I think that is a cautionary tale, because if you can't, you're probably right. You may not be able to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you're right. It depends on your business. But I want to ask about, you have to have a certain temperament to network well. You have to have really good communication skills.
Yeah.
You need to understand how to speak the language of the people that you're listening and talking to. You need to be articulate. You have to dress the part. You have to be ready with your personal appearance all the time. You know, when you're running a business, like these are things that entrepreneurs and startups and small business owners don't consider, not just in the present, but over the long term. Like this is a long view thing. I mean, you know, you have to always have like a full wardrobe of clothes to be rolling out there in the space, right?
I know business owners, one that I'm thinking of in particular, that will not leave the house and go into the neighborhood or area. It's more than just a neighborhood where her business is, unless she's dressed in a way that she would want her clients to see her dress.
Exactly.
Because you might be walking into a restaurant and someone says, hey, there's so-and-so, the owner of so-and-so.
Look at them. Ooh.
Here's, you know, it doesn't matter if you're at the grocery store, at this or at that. You always want for people to be able to introduce you and for you to make those connections.
And why is this a cautionary tale? I mean, I know for me it's a cautionary tale because this means it costs money.
It's a cautionary tale because you don't want to miss opportunities. Yes, it costs money.
It costs money. It costs money. I mean, you got to figure out where to get the money.
And you never know who you're going to run into, especially when you're in the area where your business is. And the worst thing that you don't want to happen is for there to be an opportunity for an introduction to be made or a possible new client, and you're not ready. Camera ready.
You're not camera ready. I mean, and you know, the other piece is, you know, when you talk about networking, there's going to be plenty of times when you're networking where you are so uncomfortable. You're just like, you feel physically, your body is like, I feel so out of place. You know, where am I? What am I doing here? Why am I here? This is like, how did I even get here? I mean, there's times like that where you're second guessing and doubting everything. And this is the time where you can be completely derailed and go down that rabbit hole we talked about before about motivation. Or you can just hunker down, dig your heels in and say, you know what? This is the life of uncomfort. Like I'm not in a place, you know, where I'm going to be, you know, feeling like everything's working. You're going to have those moments where you're not even sure what you're doing there. Someone's talking to you and you might actually be listening to them speak and you might be like, what?
Yeah.
What? I mean, you know, this is what happens when you're an entrepreneur, when you're trying to run a small business or start one.
Yeah.
This is what happens. You got to get used to it.
Yeah, you do. And you have to accept that whether you're selling a product or you're selling professional services, the common denominator is that you're selling, which for the most part means that your ABC always be closing too. For the most part, it means that you're selling yourself to a certain extent. Even if you have a product, if you're a visible owner of that brand, you are, whether you like it or not, an embodiment or an extension of the brand itself. So
that takes a lot of time, and that's, you know,
it takes practice.
It takes a lot of practice. And, you know, you might need to, this is a place where you might need to watch videos and see how other people do it. I mean, you know, we could do an entire podcast on networking, you know, different networking tactics, you know, that would be something that would be great. I'm also thinking about, when it comes to networking, you have to have excellent speaking skills. Yeah. You've got to know how to listen, but also how to talk, right?
So I used to be horrible at small talk.
Really?
And to be honest, I absolutely hate small talk because
you hate small talk,
it is
Esther.
like the verbal version of ephemera. Like it just is not, it doesn't really, but
you're intolerant of small talk. Like you don't want to talk about dishes and curtains
or the weather substantive. Or whatever. But
okay. How did you overcome that? What did you do? What did you overdo to change that lack of like around small talk? Because I get it. But
I spent a long time around people who had absolutely nothing in common with me, and so I had to be able to make small talk, or else I would just be quiet in the room.
Did you intentionally seek that out?
I did not. I was kind of thrown into it, but I think intentionally seeking it out might not be a bad thing.
Okay.
I also engage in activities that I feel like people that I would need to network with think are valuable or that play into the things that they're interested in. So having a conversation with someone who might not expect me to know a lot about like hiking and camping or whatever, being able to pull that out and say, oh, like this, and that is a way to break the ice with someone.
And how do you pull that out? And the reason I'm asking is I was at an event recently, and there was a woman that approached me. She wanted to meet me to talk about the work I'm doing in Chicago with Google Digital Coaches.
Yeah.
And I was struck by the fact that she came up to me wanting to meet me, but then she spent the entire time talking about her business. And I just was sitting in front of her listening, and I was like, why did you come up to me in the first place? Like, I don't even know what you want, you know? It was interesting to me. I thought,
there has to be some level of sincerity to what you're doing. For me, first of all, any salesperson understands the need to make a personal connection with someone. And you can't really make a true personal connection with someone unless you're open to listening and observing them to understand what's important to them, what's interesting to them. And a lot of times that means asking a question and then listening. And then based on what they say, deciding what you're going to lend your verbal attention to, even if that attention means you're reaffirming some of the things that they say or helping them feel comfortable to get to know you. Because you can't sell to someone who doesn't trust you, and you don't gain trust from a distance from someone.
So what I'm hearing is, and I hear this a lot, people that have a business, they hate sales.
Yeah, that's a problem.
I know. They don't like doing what you're talking about.
Because do people just, is this Toys for Tots? Do people just drop stuff off for you? Like, what? Is this Salvation Army? Like, what is this? If you have a business and you don't like selling stuff, then you have a volunteer organization.
I know.
In which case, you still have to sell yourself because you need donations to keep yourself afloat. I mean, so you're still in the money game.
This isn't Charlie Brown free hugs lemonade stand. This is like the essence of Cautionary tale. Like, if you hate sales, you've got to find someone that loves it. Yeah. If you can't do it, because we're talking about entrepreneurship and small business and starting and growing and scaling. Like, you can't do that stuff if you hate it.
It's also, here's the thing though, when people think about sales, and this is someone coming from a background where I have been in sales before, a lot of people don't like bad sales or aggressive sales. Whatever is your authentic feeling of the way that you want other people to feel from you, you can still give them that feeling and have that connection with them and still offer your services. So a lot of people think about sales and they think about aggressiveness or pushiness or insincerity.
Well, they think of the car salesman.
Yeah. They think of some level of sliminess and insincerity.
Slimy.
When in reality, the best type of sales doesn't feel like sales because it's giving you something that adds value to your life. That's the beauty of capitalism, is that you give me money and then I give you something that you either need or want. Either way, it adds to your life.
When you're starting a business though, or you're launching or growing, there is a place where you need to do cold calling. And
I've done cold calling.
You know what? When I started 21 years ago, that's all I did was cold call, girl. I was like literally like doing all this research and looking for clues and reading between the lines and trying to find things that align with what I wanted to do and being very direct and asking questions. It took a while to get to the point of how to charge. That took me time. Like, how to charge took me a long time, right? And how to say no when things were too cheap. But that being said, the cold calling conversation is something that entrepreneurs and startups have to think about, because the cold calling is not dissimilar from walking into a room where you know no one and you're trying to find a person to talk to meet that's going to receive your information. So do you have any like a top 3 tips on cold calling on that? Because that's a tough one.
So there are a couple of things about cold calling that are interesting. There's a science to it. Some people have scripts, and I think a script can be helpful.
Oh, a script.
Because the right script will strike a balance between being purposeful and being sincere. The worst thing that you can do is pick up the phone and someone on the other line hears you and you sound like you're reading something. But if you already know what you're going to say beforehand and you've practiced it, if you practice it enough, it will sound expository. That's the word. The word is expository.
I'm laughing because there's a really great movie called Sorry to Bother You. And
I never say that. You never say sorry to bother you.
You've got to watch this film because it's I mean,
I'm
not
gonna
gonna
watch it.
I'm
It
not
sounds
gonna
great.
I'm not gonna do spoiler alert, but you know, it's an African American guy who has a little bit of a career change, and he becomes a telemarketer.
Yeah, I think I saw
You have
previews for this. I saw previews for this, and I wanted to see it.
But I want to just say, bring it up because he had a script.
The second one is practice. Practice. The only way that you're going to get comfortable talking to absolute strangers is if you practice talking to absolute strangers. And for me, with the cold
That's so
call,
good, Esther.
at the end of the day, I thought to myself, these people are never going to meet me if something doesn't come of this. After a while, you get past that feeling of fear, and then you start leaning in and feeling confident. And when someone hears you being confident on the phone, it doesn't sound like you're this nervous sales kid trying to get them to buy something that they don't really need, and you're apologetic and shrinking. You sound like someone who's like, hey, I have something that I think you need. I would really like to talk to you about it.
And that's practice. Like you, after over time, you get practice. And what's your third tip?
Tip number 3, understand that you're always selling something.
Always. You mean not even, I mean, you're just like always be selling.
Everyone is always, whether you know it or not, you're selling something.
Okay.
Regardless.
Gotcha.
Whether you're talking to a guy or a girl at the bar, or you're, meeting up with friends, or you're walking down the street. You're
driving or riding in your Uber or Lyft.
Or riding in your Uber. You're always selling something. And the moments where you do meet someone and you guys hit it off, you've just done a really good job of selling yourself.
And what's critical about this is when you are an entrepreneur or a small business, you almost have to walk through life always selling.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're working for another company where there's a lot of other people like you, and even if you are working for another company, we talked about this earlier. So suppose you're one of, 5 employees. Hopefully the person that has hired you to be one of their 5 employees understands that they've communicated to you that you're kind of, when you're out there, you've always got to be selling too. Selling does not mean you have to go out there and get a client. I mean, that's what your boss is hopefully doing for the most part. But it does mean when you're present in this capacity, you're representing something. Thinking about, selling and being able to jump into strange environments and wing it and still come out on the side of happy, you have to understand how to work with people of all different ethnicities and genders and political affiliations and temperaments. I mean, and that's tough because you somehow have, what are you going to do now? Be a mind reader? Be like, you're going to have to what do you have to be as an entrepreneur? You have to be a body language understand. You got to be a body language reader. You got to be a CIA agent. You have to be like, you have
to be open and
you have
observant.
To be a spy. Yeah, you got to be a lot of things, right?
Yeah. You have to morph yourself. It's almost like with any business, you have to stop thinking from a consumer perspective and start thinking from a business owner perspective, and that has a lot to do.
Everything comes back to that.
Yeah.
Stop thinking like a consumer.
You know what bad customer service is like when you're on the receiving end of it. You know what great customer service is like when you are upset about something that went wrong and someone handles you in a way that brings you back down and makes you feel comfortable and confident, or like your issue has been resolved. You know what that's like, but very few people take time to think about the fact that however that individual handled you, that was purposeful. Like, people don't accidentally have great customer service. It's something that they practice,
right?
Because you're not the first disgruntled customer they've come about,
right? And I mean, I think that generally, men and women communicate differently. They have different styles and different ways to handle their bodies, and they respond differently to environments. They respond differently when they're in an environment of the opposite sex or the same sex. So handling diverse people does include, if you're a woman, how do you do business with a man?
Yeah.
I mean, you might already know. Or a customer, right? Or how do you partner?
Especially
or if you're a woman, how do you do business with another woman? Or, how do you work with people that speak a different language or have an accent? Or how do you, communicate with people that are a different ethnicity or from a different country
age.
Or a different age? So, and when you say to yourself, well, I really don't have customers like that, well, you're probably leaving money on the table. Like if you don't have diverse customers, I mean, think about this. McDonald's wants everybody to eat a hamburger. Everyone. I mean, like, you think any human being, they want that has a buck to walk into their store and buy a burger. They want it. So they have created an environment to advertise to every single man, woman, child, and everything else that walks the earth to figure out how do we need to personally communicate with this person for them to, buy our products or to think about our brand in a certain way. And so when you're a small business, I know it's kind of hard to say, I'm not McDonald's. You don't have to be McDonald's, but at some level you need to think about, understanding to advertise and communicate with diverse audiences.
Next topic, taxes.
I hate that.
Yeah, me too.
People take that for granted. I'm going to tell you, I mean,
I know.
Here's my cautionary tale around that. So I started a band in 1997, and we launched the band like a business, thinking that what we needed to do was do a limited liability corporation for the band. Right? We just thought, this is what we need to do, and we got some advice, and it wasn't the best advice. And I didn't take that conversation as seriously as I took with Birk Creative, which back then in 97 was called Birk Design Inc. So Birk Design was a whole different piece for me. But the band, I was like, oh yeah, limited liability corporation. So really big mistake, because the cost to run a limited liability corporation was so extraordinary to the revenue we were bringing in that we ended up paying more in taxes.
No.
Yes, we did.
No.
Yes.
No. Don't finish the sentence.
We did.
No. Mm-mm.
I mean, and this was like one of those things.
What would you have set it up as?
Nothing.
Interesting.
We just would have done Schedule C's down the line. I mean, I was overthinking. Like, here's the thing. I just was assuming we were going to be successful, which we were, and we still are, but not to that extent. Like, it's just, we could have kept on as just filing a Schedule C on our income tax returns, and it would have been fine, and just writing off the expenses. But the cost for the accountant, the legal filing, the reports, the records that we had to keep.
Because you were getting paid for gigs and stuff. I don't know.
Well, yeah, it was gigs, and it was mechanical royalties, selling records. I mean, whatever you name it. But the process and the paperwork required to maintain the LLC.
Oh my gosh.
Literally, there was no benefit to it all. And that's what I'm telling you. Like, when people start a business and they're like already thinking about setting up their companies in certain ways, you really need to have good advice. And the way to get good advice is to have a certified public accountant and a lawyer. But when you get these two individuals or companies to work for you, you need to find people that have some understanding of your business industry. So you don't want to have a law firm or a certified public accountant, and their main client base is manufacturers,
right,
and you're over here like doing creative services or selling cupcakes. I mean, they may not understand the intricacies of customer service and supply chain with like flour and sugar or whatever, or how to like rent a kitchen and ensure that you're not going to get sued if someone cuts their finger off when they're chopping your strawberries.
Yeah.
So, you got to think about things like that. So that's kind of the cautionary tale around that. And, you could make a lot of money having a great CPA, and you can lose a lot of money by having the wrong formulation of your company. I mean, it's just endless. And then of course there's a tax conversation. So when you have a business and you have employees, if you decide to have employees, that is,
right,
you've got to talk about things like payroll. I mean, we had a conversation in New York.
1099 or salary, whatever.
Ask yourself, when you think about this, like, okay, if I have employees, sure. I mean, I have them on staff, and it protects me against them going away. But then you also have to ask yourself, wow, if I have an employee, then I have to have workman's compensation, don't I?
Right.
Then I have to make sure that I'm protected and they're protected if something happens. So there's just these considerations when you're starting a business that you don't. Sometimes you're taken by surprise, and I guess the reason we're having this conversation is to please don't be surprised by any of this. Like, don't just go in guns blaring. I'm doing this. Like,
Do your homework.
Take a minute to think about some things, you know. I had a conversation a couple weeks ago with a woman who was leaving her wonderfully large company to start her own business, and we sat down over dinner. And the first question I asked her, and she was starting a coaching business. The first question I asked her was, on your website, did you disclose that, you know, you're not providing medical advice and to please seek a doctor if you need help? No. I'm like, well, you need to do that because you're not thinking that you're a doctor, but people that are coming to you for business coaching, they're seeing you as a therapist, that you're going to help them live. And if you make a mistake, you know, you want to make sure that you have copy that says, I'm not providing medical advice. And do you have the kind of insurance in case something does go wrong? You know, this person had a family, they had a house, and I'm like, you need to make sure that you're cool if something goes wrong. And she didn't think about it. She was just ready to just do her own thing. And I thought, too much risk and liability around that. I wouldn't take a chance. And then, you know, one of the other things that I feel like I want to talk about is let's talk about like friends. You know, how
many of us have them?
Do we? You did not. You did not just do that, did you?
Yeah.
Now I can't get it out of my head.
Yep.
We need to play that now. But what about friends? Like, where did they go? Can you afford to have friends when you're starting a business? Talk about the friendship environment, because this is tough.
It really depends on who your friends are. I think that people grossly underestimate the time that it takes to run a successful business.
Yeah. Okay.
Because when you see people running successful businesses from the outside looking in, they look like they've got it all together because they're supposed to look like that because they're professionals. When you get on the back end of things, you begin to realize that especially starting a business is a labor and time intensive process, regardless of what that business is. And if you have a lifestyle that demands a lot of time doing recreational things,
ooh, bye-bye.
You won't even get enough sleep to be able to, you know, keep up with the pace that you're going to need to keep up if you want to grow.
So listen, I used to have a dinner group that I
thought you were going to say I used to have friends.
Well, you know what? That's what I'm trying to say. That's my story. I'm serious. Like, I had a dinner group and I used to get together with women, these women friends I had. We're all moms, and we'd have cocktails and dinner, and we would meet, you know, once a month or sometimes twice a month. And there was a point where I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot do this anymore. I don't have time. Like, I am running a business, and I like these women, but I got to be around people that are running a business too. And we need to talk and strategize and figure out how to make more money. So I had to let it go. And it was hard because I remember my friends were like, are you coming back? Where are you? What happened? Did we say something? And it's like, no, it's not you. It's me. It's me. And I'm sorry. And it was a tough conversation because there's people that look at me and say, my God, you go hard. I'm like, yes, I have a business. Mm-hmm. Did you say that to Jeff Bezos when he was running Amazon?
No.
I mean, do you know what I'm saying? Do you ask Martha Stewart why she goes hard? Well, what about Oprah? Do you think that woman spends any time doing anything but thinking about her business? She would not be where she was today if she was not running her business 365 days a year.
There's also a caveat here.
Uh-oh. What's the caveat?
So I've heard different things from different business owners. Everyone will give you the generic thought that you need balance in your life, meaning that if you have a significant other, if you have kids, if you have family and friends that you want to keep that are important to you, you need to find some time to spend with them. I think scheduling is really important and critical. And I know people, me included, I will schedule a time to call my friend. I do.
Yeah. All right.
Because if I don't, then I will not do it. And that's how like 6 years go by and you're like, man, I totally have been busy this entire time. And so it's really about priorities. And your real friends or useful friends will understand.
Yes.
Like one of my friends is in grad school right now. And she's like, oh my gosh, grad school sucks. I'm so busy. I miss you so much. I'm like, I miss you too. And I understand because I've been in grad school. You know, send me a letter. Like,
yeah,
I get it.
I get it.
And I want her to succeed,
but I mean,
so I'm not going to be demanding of her time.
But that's my point, though. I mean, like, I feel like you have to be around people that get it. And they give you the space to do it because they know where you're at. Yeah. They know where you're at. So consider that, you know, when I said no to the dinner group, when I said I absolutely am recognizing now my limitations. I'm recognizing that I have a business and I also have a family. And I can't do all this anyway.
There's a limit.
And I had to decide, you know, I either have to do the thing that is driving revenue for my family, or I have to, you know, spend time organizing, convening, coming up with the dates, and like literally assuming that 3 hours of that is going to be spent here. And of course I'm going to have a couple cocktails. So I know that when I go home, I can't work. I'm going to probably go to bed. Yeah. So, you know, you're right. I mean, if that's the kind of balance you're talking about, then I accept that kind of balance. And I made a decision that to say no. But this is something that entrepreneurs, you know, forget. And I talk to a lot of women and I tell them, when you're launching your business, you're going to have to figure out and understand that you have to cut some of this stuff off. It's got to stop. You can't be out there socializing and partying anymore
unless you're a party promoter, which I know party promoters that do not party at the parties that they throw because they're working. They don't drink. They're working.
They're working. So, you know, that's a tough one for people to realize that this is a grind.
It can also be limiting.
What do you mean?
As far as if you have friends who none of them are business owners or have the concept of what it really takes to run a business in their exactly, because what's going to happen is here's what's going to happen. Here's going to happen. You work too much.
Time for new friends.
You work too much. Oh my gosh, you work all the time. You work too much. You work too much. You work too much. When really, you're not even really working that hard compared to the entrepreneurs that you want to be like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you're working hard compared to the average person because the average person doesn't own a business. The average person works for someone. The person who owns the business that they work for is the CEO. They work a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like a framing thing, a contextual thing. It's a level of operation, a lifestyle that if you don't understand it, you're gauging yourself according to your peers. And if your peers aren't on the same track as you or don't understand the journey that you're on, you'll have a warped sense of reality.
Here's an example. I have 2 clients. Okay. I mean, I have more than 2 clients.
I was like,
no, I have more than 2 clients. We have more than 2 clients, but I have two clients on the end of the spectrum. I got one client that is like super powered. When they show up at work, they are going at it every minute they are in that door. They are 100% all in, 120%. When you hear laughter, it is short-lived. But it's business laughter.
Yeah, it's business laughter.
It is so business laughter. You know what I'm talking about? Like, it's like, they're just like, they're talking business. And even with their clients, it's like, it's all focused on business. I have another client on the other side. And when I hear their laughter, and they're doing fine, but when I hear their laughter, they're like having like fun.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
man, what's that?
I'm like, what is happening with these people? Like, you know, they're having a ball. But that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, you have to figure out, like, what kind of business are you, and what do you need to do when you are a startup business? Like, it's really not fun.
Yeah,
it's not fun. It's not fun.
It's like a baby. It's like having a baby. It's a beautiful thing when it it's a beautiful.
You can't judge. I've had 3.
I've got 3 siblings, so
I mean, how do you know if it's fun to have a baby?
Listen, let me tell you, it's like having a baby.
All you women out there know,
because the baby comes out.
Okay.
Or let's say it's like having a baby or a puppy, because they're basically the same thing.
Oh my God.
Listen, let me finish the sentence.
I can't even go there.
It will come together.
It
will come together.
Baby and puppy, no.
Here it is. Both things are beautiful and exciting when they come out. Then once it
I'm going to give it to you, Esther. Go
Listen,
ahead.
Once it arrives, you hit what I call... You hit the maintenance stage.
All the moms out there are freaking out and cringing.
I said it. Once the baby or puppy arrives, you hit the maintenance stage. What does the maintenance stage mean? every 5 seconds, the baby's like, something's wrong. This employee didn't show up to work. A customer is mad. And if you don't pay attention to it, it's going to die.
Okay, right.
Because you don't have the infrastructure. It's not a teenager yet where it can walk on its own, where you have like a general manager and an assistant or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a baby. It's a small business, a puppy. It's pooping. It's peeing. It needs to be let out. It needs to be trained. You have to pay attention to it all the time. It's beautiful. You're glad it's here. Miracle of life. Animal. Like, it's amazing. But it requires constant maintenance if it's ever going to get out of infancy. Babies and dogs, no one ever loves or cares about them as much as you do because you own them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can't expect...
So when you talk to other people about it, when you have to understand that they don't know what it's like, they don't have the connection, it isn't their baby. And so if you have friends, if you have family who don't know what it's like to have a baby or a dog or a business, they are inherently in a lot of ways not going to understand what is required of you.
Yeah,
and you have to care. You have to forgive them of that.
They don't care.
Understand them in perspective and decide what you're going to do.
It's true. And I mean, it's just hard for people to accept that you are 120%. It's hard. The one thing that I also think that entrepreneurs need to keep in mind, you can get so much free stuff, and this is about networking too. You don't need to pay for, and I'm not voting for like going out and getting logos for $99. Like, I don't believe in crowdsourcing stuff. But what I do believe is, to find the resources in your town, in your city, where you can get free business services. Like in Chicago, we have the Business and Consumer Protection Division, and they have an entire smorgasbord, a Thanksgiving table of
cornucopia.
Things. Oh yes, of things you can choose to help you start, launch, conceptualize, create, grow, scale your business, and they're all free stuff, and it's taxpayer funded. All major cities in America have this. Now, I can't speak for some of the rural communities if they have business services for free stuff, but your state might have it. Your state might have it. But the reason that this is part of a cautionary tale is that some small businesses spend money unnecessarily, or they get a phone call and they get scared and they think they have to have it and they drop a check or they drop a credit card. And these are things you don't need to do, especially now with the accessibility of all kinds of information that you can find on YouTube, even if you don't have something in your immediate town or community to get free information. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about licensing. I'm talking about zoning laws. I'm talking about tax preparation services, intellectual property protection, even counseling about what type of a business you should form. Like I said earlier, I stupidly formed an LLC. I dissolved it. If I had gone to the business and consumer protection, they might have said, what are you doing with an LLC? We don't need to form that. So you take advantage of free services and look online for free services, but make sure they're coming from the government side. Don't take free services from a third party, or, you go to an event. It's like, what are those things when you go timeshare? Like, timeshares. Oh yeah, come for this free thing, and you find out they're trying to sell you some property in like Aruba. Yeah. So you don't need to do that. And so, there's just too much available for small businesses, and you can even get networks. You can develop networks around that. So earlier you talked about joining a chamber of commerce. Yep. There's other opportunities to network and meet people, especially if you are starting to get into the space and you haven't had the time to practice. Like you talked earlier about practice. Well, maybe you don't have as much time, or maybe you really do have some social anxiety. Look for opportunities to join a board, a junior board, or even a more mature board. Go to a nonprofit and find out how you can contribute and how you can volunteer, and have conversations around your business with opportunities like that. I mean, make sure when you look for a board to join that it's aligned with the type of work you're doing. I mean, I joined a board a few years ago, And I thought it would be helpful for my business. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to join this board. It was a wonderful organization full of wonderful women, but really had nothing to do with my business. And I'm not going to say I wasted 3 years, but it was 3 years that I could have contributed my talents to an organization that could actually leverage my talents that would then help put me in position to grow my business and develop networks that were more aligned with the kind of work I was looking for. So those are ways to kind of get out there.
Yeah.
And the reason it's a cautionary tale is people that are starting a business don't realize how powerful board positions are, or how powerful it is to be in a tribe of people that have opted in to be there. Versus you showing up at a networking event where everyone's just like, it's like a cattle call, or, it's Survivor, like it's like isn't it like Survivor going to networking events? You're just like, who's going to come out here,
Everyone's scrapping for resources, people getting voted off the island. It's insane.
That's what it's like.
Yeah. It also helps to give you something to talk about.
Oh yeah.
It's really hard to make small talk if you don't do anything interesting. And if you are someone who suffers with social anxiety, or you're bad at small talk, if you're on a board of something and your position is aligned with what you do, that's a talking point. If you don't feel comfortable talking specifically about client work.
Exactly.
It's a really good way to break the ice, and it shows that you have some sense of social responsibility. It lends you credibility. So if you're at a larger event and there are board members there, you know what I mean? It lends you some sort of social validation, and gives you a reference point if you're in a room of people that you don't know.
And, one thing I want to specifically call out is when you're a woman, because you and I are both women. And a lot of times for women in business, we have multiple things to think about, because oftentimes we are in environments where there's a lot of men, or we have to work with men, because they're the ones that are running things,
make up half the planet,
take up half the planet. Exactly. So and that's perfectly beautiful. I mean, we all work together, and this is what we talked about earlier, understanding how to communicate in diverse environments, but for women in particular, I think when it comes to networking and starting a business, we just have to be very careful, and almost overcompensate sometimes to make sure that we're professional all the times, because some of the things that other people might look at, some of the things we do and get the wrong idea, or get the wrong message, or get the wrong opinion. So what does that mean? That means, ensuring that you're dressed appropriately for a business environment.
Yeah.
And I'm not passing judgment on women that, wear makeup or jewelry. It's just that when you're in a business environment and you're selling, products and services. Now, I'm not talking about someone that has maybe started a business, a small, shop in Chicago that's selling random things. I mean, it depends on what you're selling. But generally speaking, if you're there for business, act the part and be the part, so that you don't have situations where people think you're there for something else.
Yeah. I think it's a contextual thing as well, because, I mean, this could go so many different ways. I mean, I'm not going to say everyone, but a lot of women wear makeup and jewelry to professional settings, but specifically
And I do.
And I do. So contextually speaking, you really have to understand the context of the people around you, what the culture is around you, and how you can fit into that culture and present yourself in the most professional way possible. A lot of times, like with sales, it's less about where you're coming from and more about where the person you're speaking to is at, and what you need to do to convey your message to them, how you can speak their language.
Right. And I agree. When it comes to male and female relations, because I have a lot of women entrepreneurs in the space, and we talk about this a lot, where we're at networking events, and some of the men that are there are not really there for the same reason we are. And it gets a little tricky. So you always have to be on your P's and Q's. You always have to be very cognizant and pay attention to your surroundings. And you do have to keep a slight distance, when you're doing business. You've got to keep a slight distance around you to make sure that people understand that you're there for business. You don't want to invite you don't want to invite unwanted conversation if it's not aligned with your goals as a business. And this is tough for women sometimes in environments. I mean, we're dealing with a lot of issues in the United States right now anyway.
Yeah.
Especially along with sexual harassment and inappropriate behavior and all kinds of things. So when you're when you're, in a business environment and when you're trying to do business, make sure that everyone that you're talking to knows that's what it's all about.
The responsibility shouldn't be on a woman to rebuff a man's advances, especially from a professional setting, because your mind isn't even there. So what we're talking about is a level of vigilance that, although shouldn't have to be put in place, is still important to put in place because that's the world that we live in. So
true.
If you're a very open and inviting person, that's amazing. That's a really good quality to have.
Mm-hmm.
You should also be prepared to know that there are some men who in professional settings, although those settings are professional, receive openness and friendliness in a way that is not professional.
At the bottom of all this, I want to just talk about stress because it's a grind. Stress. And what does stress mean? Stress means that when you are...
It was like
a lot of
a
things.
lot of stuff.
I mean, when you think about stress and what's required, the physical requirement, the mental, emotional, spiritual, psychological requirement. I mean, think about when we were in New York last week on business. We were on business for 6 straight days in New York.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't stop.
Mm-mm.
We were on that G train.
Yeah.
In New York, stuck for 30 minutes underground.
Wall
to wall people at 12:30 coming back from a networking event at the New York Stock Exchange.
It was horrible.
I mean, we got a lot of business done, but it was exhausting, And then after we got off the train and we went and had dinner, what did we do? We immediately ordered cocktails.
Yeah.
And, you got to watch out with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go down a rabbit hole of, alcohol, sleep pills. I mean, whatever it takes, because you're constantly moving and constantly doing.
That is why I feel like adding health and wellness routines to your daily life is really important, because it's really easy to slip into overcompensating through extra caffeine or alcohol to help you relax.
And I love tea.
Sleep pills to help you go to sleep and all of these things, when in reality, business people are athletes.
They better be.
They're athletes, and you have to be mentally focused and alert, but you also have to pay attention to your physical well-being. So if you're not conditioning your body to keep up with that pace, that overcompensation can only go so far. I mean, there's a reason why high-powered execs are known for having heart attacks, right?
Yeah. So intense. It is so intense. And let me just say this. If it's not intense, you're probably not an entrepreneur.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
You're not. You're not an entrepreneur if it's not intense. If you're not constantly grinding and thinking and planning and strategizing and working and creating, what are you doing? What are you doing? And if you're not feeling the pressure, well, you might be failing, or this may not be right for you, or you're just doing it all wrong. I mean, so within that context, things do go by the wayside. What goes by the wayside? Sleep. You lose sleep. You can't sleep, not because you can't get to sleep, but because you have too much to do. And you're just like, I got to do this stuff. And, you got to pace yourself, and it takes practice.
Yes.
What else goes away? You said eating well. When you're on the road, you don't eat as well.
Mm-hmm.
When I was on the road, when I was in my band with my husband, before we started having a family, 3 weeks on the road, eating at, we were in Europe, of course, and Europe has different food environment than the United States. But, the gas stations serve like fresh green beans and fresh greens orange juice and, vegetables and cabbage. It's totally different. It was great. I lost a ton of weight, but I wasn't eating well, but it was a grind. And that's something you got to be careful of. What else goes away? We talked earlier about family and kids.
Yeah.
And friendships.
Yeah.
And then...
Or you accept a new normal. I know people who they work a ridiculously intense amount, but when they go on vacation...
Oh, Lord God. What happens?
Do not speak to them. They're off the grid. Or if they aren't, they have sparing moments, but when they do have family time, they are sure to spend that quality time sometimes I feel like there's a misconception around people who work really hard, because there are people who have regular 9-to-5 jobs who, when they're sitting with their kids, they're on their phone.
Yeah, they're on their phone.
So I would rather
Sure.
work really hard
Right.
during these intense periods of time during the week,
Mm-hmm.
and when I'm at dinner or I'm spending family time, I'm fully present, than say, well, I come home every day to my kids at this time, but you're watching TV and you're on your phone, or you're not. So you really have to be honest with yourself about the quality of what you're doing, not just the appearance of what you're doing.
Right.
And it works differently for everybody else. Some people have a spouse or partner that's in a position to, make up for what they can't necessarily do. Or, I grew up, my mom worked nights, my dad worked during the day. I didn't feel like I was deprived of anything, because when my mom was hanging out with us, she was with us, and
Right.
we never wanted for anything. She cooked and she did all that stuff,
And she was not an entrepreneur.
and she was not an entrepreneur.
No.
She was a nurse.
No, she was not. She
Yeah.
worked for someone else who had an entire system running for her to show up and keep it running.
Yeah. But when you look at that schedule, I say that to say that people's schedules are different. But I
Mhm.
think sometimes our society makes us think that if we don't fit into a specific mold as a parent or as a partner,
Yeah.
that somehow means we're failing, when really it's about what works for you and what has utility for you.
And I love the fact that you're talking about the perception of failure. So when I think about all of the things that we're talking about now, which is, lack of sleep, lack of nutrition, lack of sex, lack of
I didn't
friendships.
say
I'm just saying. I
Yes,
mean,
yes,
when
yes.
you're starting a business or launching
Mhm.
a business or scaling
It's
whatever,
a lot. You're married to it.
Your brain is rewired to do
It really
something very different. It's not a normal life. It's not for everyone. And the question does become, this romanticization of entrepreneurship. It is not romantic. It's dirty and it's hard and it's exhausting.
Mhm.
And sometimes even the most successful entrepreneur, if you even just move past, the fundamental needs of human beings, not having them all the time the way you used to, you sometimes wonder, wow, am I really an entrepreneur? Is this real? Is this fake? Do I really know what I'm talking about? I don't even think I know this stuff. This is, oh my God, I feel like a liar. I'm an imposter. This isn't even real. I mean, you do have moments where, and sometimes some people have these moments more than others.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's important to really have either a peer group or a mentor or something visible that you can look at to relate to. I think it's important to be in environments with other business owners and entrepreneurs, because, like we said earlier, very few people in your life will understand what you're dealing with.
Oh God, no.
Or what sacrifices you have to make, or the time commitment, or the intensity and level of output you have to, bring to fruition. Very few people are going to be able to relate to that, because very few people know what it's like to build something out of nothing.
Yeah. And
very few people do. So,
and there's not very many people. I mean, and the other piece on the other side of this too is, for those that aren't entrepreneurs, there's nothing wrong with not being one. I mean, that's the other thing. I'm starting to feel like there's people that feel like they're not good enough because they're not an entrepreneur. I'm meeting more people that look around. Like, I had a meeting last week, and I was there on a new business development pitch, and I was astonished at this meeting that for the first 10 minutes, this person was telling me about their plans to exit and start a business. And I was like, wow, is that what's happening now? Like, people are in companies now looking around saying, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to stop giving away my ideas and expertise and beauty and concepts and my network and my community and start my own thing. When they say that, do they really, really know?
most of the times, no.
There's no way that
In their mind,
no
they
way.
see an image of a baby-faced Mark Zuckerberg wearing a hoodie.
You think that's what it is?
I think that there's this idea, and it also, this is an important.
Listen, when
This is
I started
important.
my business, I had no idea. I didn't know.
No,
20 years
you don't.
ago.
But the culture around it has changed, and I think that
Mm-hmm.
it also is extremely detrimental, because there are people who don't have the stamina to be an entrepreneur, who feel like the way to be successful is to be an entrepreneur, because that's what success looks like. Before, it used to be like you got a job at a Fortune 500
and that
company,
was what success looked like.
So there are people who just want that validation of feeling like whatever the societal picture of success is. Right now, it is a business person who is self-made in a lot of ways. No one really tells you about this stuff that we're talking about.
I'll tell you one thing they also don't tell you about. So 20 years in business for me. Okay. So I first started my business, and I started like a business. I wasn't thinking of making a job for myself at a kitchen table. My idea was, I'm going to have a company, and I'm going to have employees, and I'm going to have an agency. And I did from day one. Okay. Bottom line, period. 20 years ago, my company has been through ups and downs and a massive recession. And fortunately, when the massive recessions have hit my company, I was already established enough to withstand some of it. And I had clients that I kept working with, right? And admittedly, granted, I'm professional services. So, we are hired for our strategy and thinking. We don't have a retail storefront, right? We're not selling shoes, and we're not selling things, and we don't have to deal with that kind of ecosystem and environment. A little bit different. I mean, I work for people that do that.
Mm-hmm.
So the ups and downs are something that I don't think people understand. They've never seen it. They've never been through it. And it's very different when you're in a downturn working for a large company than when you're in a downturn working for yourself. And there's people out there right now that have a company, and they're one or two people, and they're not ready for anything really, really bad to happen, where all the things we're giving them, where we're telling them about right now, all these cautionary tales, they may not have a lawyer. They may not have their company set up properly. They may not be totally ready to network, or maybe they haven't been networking. So
Which
when
means
things
they don't
go
have diverse clients.
when things go south and they have to go back out there and try to find stuff and make magic happen, and they haven't been doing it and they haven't prepared, well, this is one of those things that's a cautionary tale. You've got to realize that we're in a really amazing time right now, with technology is giving us everything we ever dreamed of all the time, whenever we want it. And it's not always going to be like that. We're going to have the tools. Entrepreneurship is not for everybody.
Right.
It is not always beautiful. It's very painful. It hurts. It's disappointing sometimes. It's exhilarating. You'll be in a world that makes you feel 100% alive, but you can't count on it all the time. You got to work really, really hard to keep things going when things are not going to be going perfectly well all the time, because we're in a great time right now.
Yeah. You definitely have to have a comfort in crisis type of mentality. And that's entrepreneurship all the time. I mean, let alone in an economic downturn. All the time, most of the time, if you're at the top of the food chain as far as a company goes, if you're not dealing with clients, you're dealing with employees. If you're growing and you start hiring more people, eventually you might need to fire someone. That's part of growing. Or you're going to come across a customer or client that isn't for you. And that's fine too. But you have to be comfortable in dealing with those things, because that's what comes with growing a business. On a high note.
What's the high note, Esther?
The high note
because we
is
don't want
that-
to make people cry. Although
No.
we do say cry at dinner.
Yeah.
We
And
talk about that.
there are few things that are worth doing that aren't difficult or have some sort of challenge. And so if you're deciding that you want to own a business, you're doing something that most people don't do and can't do.
Okay.
That means that you're going to have to do things that most people aren't willing to do or cannot do. With that being said, when you execute over time at this level and you dedicate yourself to your craft, to your business, to growing, the reward is you have a business that stands the test of time.
Yeah.
The reward is you get a little better at doing it every time. The reward is you contribute something to society in a different way. You bring your ideas to fruition. You give people jobs. You create the environment that you want. You put things into the world, right? Even at a micro level.
Or you sell it.
Or you sell it and you make money.
Yep.
But to have the things that most people don't have. You have to do the things that most people won't or can't do. And it's like running a marathon. It might be really painful, but when you cross the finish line or you hit another milestone or whatever, that's a rewarding feeling that a lot of people don't get to experience. Good luck. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Honest Field Guide podcast, where we discuss stories from the front lines, cautionary tales. I'm Esther Ikoro.
I'm JinJa Birkenbeuel.
And we will talk to you next time. The Honest Field Guide podcast is produced by Birk Creative, written and created by JinJa Birkenbeuel and Esther Ikoro. The podcast is recorded in the innovation and technology capital of the Midwest, Chicago, at Stomping Ground Studios in Ukrainian Village.
Original music is written by and provided courtesy of Utah Carol. Follow Honest Field Guide on Instagram and Twitter. The opinions expressed on the Honest Field Guide are opinions only and only represent the views of JinJa Birkenbeuel and Esther Ikoro.